Hello, everyone. I was having a really fascinating Voxer conversation the other day with a coaching client of ours. And this client's so hungry, right? And I'm sharing this story with you guys because I feel like a lot of you will relate to this when I actually unveil some of what come out of this really energizing Voxer chat. Anyway, the client reached out to me and said, Chrissy, I feel like I might have a money block, but at the same time, I don't really know if I do because I feel like I'm deserving of money. I believe in my ability to make money. Like, I know that I'm going to be successful, but it just doesn't happen. And I'm like, oh, this is interesting. This is interesting. So tell me a little bit more about, you know, um, the last couple of weeks. Have you had any negative reaction emotionally, or have you been triggered, or when it's come to money situations? She's like, no, no, like, the money comes in, the money goes out. That's kind of the challenge. Like, I can make the money, easy come, but then the money just goes. And I went, uh-huh. Right? I said, that's the challenge, right? So your relationship with money is easy come, easy go, right? And what happened as a result of that realization and then the conversation that followed is that you may be aware, well, this client was not aware, right, that she was had an unconscious agreement with herself that when money came into her bank account, the anticipated response is that it goes back out again to pay all the bills. And that's the way that money has always flowed with her. Come, go, right? But that in itself is an unhelpful, unconscious anticipation and expectation. And I called it an unconscious agreement. I said, you seem to have, or we've just realized and acknowledged that you have an unconscious agreement with yourself that as soon as money hits your bank account, that it leaves to pay bills. And she's like, you're right. I never even thought of it that way. And then what I suggested for her to overcome some of this, because unconscious needs attention as much as you're conscious, but it's just more difficult because unconscious is unconscious, right? It's not always there for us to see and observe. It's not, it's very covert. It's this, an unconscious agreement is something that is not always identifiable by the person that might be encountering challenges without any understanding or insight as to why these challenges keep arising. The only way we found it is through exploration, right? I started asking questions, she started thinking deeper, she started entering into a narrative with me, and then naturally the unconscious agreement came to the surface, right? Which is why I want to, encourage you guys around self reflection and the ability to even connect with somebody to have conversations like this, getting a different perspective, seeing what somebody else's viewpoint is on something is and I would say it's an absolute necessity to you being able to explore the incidence of unconscious agreements that you might have within yourself, right? I had another call with a client, and I didn't frame it up as an unconscious agreement, but it was kind of the same thing. This client has had lots of challenges with courageous conversations with her team members, right? And what we've uncovered is that her people pleasing, or I call it self sacrifice. So her motivation to just keep everybody happy. And again, her perception of keeping everybody happy was avoiding confrontation. In my opinion, it's having difficult conversations, meant that she wasn't getting the movement that she hoped for in terms of the performance and the alignment of her team. And that was on repeat. Like but bringing that, she had an unconscious agreement with herself that she won't have uncomfortable conversations with people because she doesn't want to upset them. That's an example of her unconscious agreement, right? That we brought to the surface and we said, this is evident. What do we need to do about it? How do we manage it? Now we've named it and we've acknowledged that it's there, which is step one. Acknowledgement and development insight is always step one to managing unconscious agreements. Step two is then, what do we do about it? So in the instance of the easy come, easy go money agreement, unconscious agreement with this client, I recommended that she just do some recoding, so journaling around abundance and accumulation of money, right? Accumulate, not easy come, easy go. Right, so accumulation of money and some visualization around that. So she's gone off and she's going to set up her journals and because again, like it's when you work in the unconscious, it's that you've got to engage in practices around recoding, right? So journaling is a form of recoding. Journaling, you can, and there's lots of different forms of journaling, but the journaling that I asked her to do was to write down accumulation-based statements like they've already happened, right? I have money, it stays with me, my bank account is full, I feel abundant, accumulation style journaling, right? Because we've got to recode. The more you do that over and over again, the bigger impact that has on the unconscious coding, and you can actually start to reshape it. Okay, make it something else. So it's not imposing in a way that is unhelpful, right? Because you're pretty much coding over the top of it, right? In the instance of the client who had the unconscious agreement around, I won't have difficult conversations because I don't want to upset people, we did some work around, her over what's the word for it? Her over, I want to say responsibility taking. Like she took too much responsibility for the way that other people felt. And that's not about running around and being a barbarian to people and being awful, but how people feel is actually not your responsibility, right? So obviously you have an obligation to act with kindness and respect. And when you do that, even if the person becomes upset, it's actually not your responsibility, right? They're like, it is your responsibility to self-regulate. It's also their responsibilities to self-regulate. So the strategy for the client that had the unconscious agreement around the I don't want to have difficult conversations because I don't want to upset people. The strategy for her was about practicing the uncomfortable conversations because, and I said to her, and she loved this analogy, I said, uncomfortable conversations are a little bit like getting in cold water. And I don't know about you, but I bloody hate cold water. I'm the person at the beach that takes 4 hours, like to actually get my body submerged. Like I hate it. Ice baths for me are like trauma on steroids, right? I'm literally terrified of cold water. But as you know, when you get into cold water and you're in there for a while, it's not that cold anymore, right? It's the same with uncomfortable activities. I said, once you start to have more and more uncomfortable conversations, it's like the cold water. They actually don't feel as uncomfortable anymore. So what I want you to do is obviously practice that, in different intensities, in different degrees. So in the two scenarios, they had different strategies, but I wanted to share with you that, some of your difficulty is probably coming from some unconscious agreements that you've made with yourself that you're not necessarily aware of, right? And the way that this shows up is in patterns and cycles. If you have a tendency to behave in a certain way that is unhelpful, it's probably a symptom of an unconscious agreement that you've got. So for example, if you're trying to lose weight and then you binge eat, there's an unconscious agreement in there around avoiding emotional discomfort or using food to soothe yourself or whatever's underlying that motivation. So think about your unhelpful behaviors. You could call it self-sabotage, you could call it whatever you like. and think about what might be underlying that. What is the unconscious agreement that I've made with myself that I keep upholding when things get difficult or I get uncomfortable or things get overwhelming or challenging? And I default to some of those old habits that keep me stuck in that situation. Unconscious agreements. We've all got them, but there is definitely something that you can do about them.